nearly 1 in 3 medical. Emergencies that occur at sea involve a passenger over the age of 65, and in the majority of those emergencies are directly triggered by something the passenger chose to do in the first 48 hours on board. There is a short list of specific behaviors that a ship's medical team sees repeated, cruise after cruise, that almost always lead to the same dangerous outcomes, and that list has never been shared publicly until now. If you are 65 or older and you have a cruise coming up, or if you are simply planning one, what you are about to hear matters more for your body than it does for almost any younger passenger on that ship. The physiology of a 65-plus traveler responds differently to the ocean environment, to the ship's air systems, to the food, to the sun, and to the disruption in daily routine. What feels like a minor inconvenience for a 45-year-old can become a genuine medical event for you. Dr. Raymond Calloway spent 11 years as a practicing physician aboard major cruise lines, sailing with lines that operate in the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and Alaska. In that time, he treated thousands of passengers, staffed the ship's medical center through 3 separate at-sea emergencies requiring helicopter evacuation, and watched the same preventable mistakes happen over and over again. He is no longer employed by any cruise line, and for the first time, he is speaking without restriction. Stay with us through item number 11, because what Dr. Calloway calls the invisible dehydration window is the single health risk he saw send more seniors to the medical center than anything else on this list, and it happens to passengers who are drinking fluids and still believe they are perfectly fine. Let us get into it. The first thing I want you to understand is that the most dangerous window of your entire cruise is not a rough sea day, not a crowded port, and not the last night of sailing. It is the first 4 hours after you board. Item 1 is something I saw repeat itself on almost every sailing I worked, and it is so simple that most people dismiss it when I bring it up. Skipping your regular medication dose on embarkation day is one of the most common reasons seniors end up in the ship's medical center before the ship has even left port. Here is why it matters more than you think. Your body relies on a consistent level of medication in your bloodstream to maintain stability. Blood pressure control, blood glucose regulation, heart rhythm management, all of these systems operate within a narrow window, and that window depends on timing. When you miss a dose, you are not simply delaying a pill. You are removing the buffer that keeps your physiology steady at exactly the moment when your physiology is already under unusual stress. You are traveling. Your sleep was probably disrupted. Your meals are off schedule. The air is different, the humidity is different, and your body is working harder than it does on an ordinary Tuesday at home, even if it does not feel that way. Most people miss this because embarkation day feels festive, not medical. There is champagne in the atrium, and music playing, and a line for the buffet, and the last thing on your mind is a pill organizer. That is precisely the problem. A 71-year-old from Charlotte, North Carolina boarded a 7-night Caribbean sailing and missed his afternoon metformin dose in the excitement of getting settled. By 9 that evening, he was lightheaded and nauseated and sitting in the ship's medical center, which charged him $220 for the consultation, a cost his travel insurance declined to cover because it was tied to a pre-existing condition. He could have prevented the entire visit by putting that dose in a labeled pouch inside his carry-on before he left home. The passenger who knew this boarded, reached their cabin, took their medication on schedule, and went to dinner. The passenger who did not ended their first night at sea in a fluorescent-lit medical room, filling out intake forms and watching their evening disappear. Same ship, completely different first day. Here is what you do. Before you leave home, separate your embarkation day doses into a small labeled pouch and place it in the bag that never leaves your body during travel. Not your checked luggage, not your carry-on in the overhead bin, the bag in your hands. Then set a phone alarm for the moment you sit down in your cabin, not for when you think you might remember. The exact words to say are, medications before minibar. Say it out loud the moment you walk through your cabin door. It sounds simple because it is, and it works precisely because of that. Now, the second item is one that feels like a reward after a long travel day, and that feeling is exactly what makes it a problem. Item 2 is the embarkation buffet, and I want to be precise about why it carries risk for your body specifically. By the time you reach that buffet line, your digestive system has already been managing the stress of transit for hours. Airport food or no food, dry recycled air, disrupted fluid intake, physical exertion with luggage, and the low-level anxiety that travel always produces even when you are looking forward to the trip. That system is not ready for a full offensive. The embarkation buffet is the most heavily loaded meal service of any cruise. It is designed to impress, and it is stacked with rich proteins, creamy sauces, shellfish, carbonated drinks, and desserts that are genuinely difficult for a settled digestive system to process, let alone one that has been on a plane since 6 in the morning. The gastrointestinal cases I saw reported in the first 18 to 24 hours of a sailing were more concentrated around embarkation day overeating than around any other single cause. The reason people ignore this is intuitive. You have been in transit for hours. You have not had a proper meal, and there is an enormous spread of beautiful food available at no additional charge. Restraint is the last thing the environment is encouraging. A 68-year-old from Edinburgh arrived at the buffet after a long flight connection and a 5-hour embarkation queue and ate shellfish, creamy pasta, rich desserts, and carbonated drinks in a single sitting. By the following morning, she was confined to her cabin and missed the ship's first port of call entirely. One light, deliberate plate and a glass of still water would have cost her nothing and preserved the next day completely. The passenger who treated embarkation day as a recovery day, chose one protein, one vegetable, and still water, felt steady the next morning, and was first off the ship at port. The passenger who treated it as a celebration spent that port day horizontal in a darkened cabin. Here is what you do. When you approach the buffet on embarkation day, choose one lean protein and one vegetable and drink still water or diluted juice. Set a personal rule that the full range of ship cuisine opens on day 2. Your body will be ready for it then, and you will actually enjoy it. The exact words to say are, day 1 is a transit day, not a feast day. Repeat it before you pick up a plate. But what comes in the next section carries consequences most passengers never see coming until it is too late. Those consequences come not from what you choose to do aboard the ship, but from what the ship itself does to your body, quietly, invisibly, from the moment you walk through the gangway. Item 3 is one that I watched unfold slowly on almost every sailing, and slowly is exactly what makes it dangerous. Spending your first 2 days in the ship's interior common areas, the casino, the show lounge, the interior dining rooms, and while breathing recirculated air, is one of the most consistent triggers I observed for respiratory decline in older travelers. Cruise ships manage their internal air through large HVAC systems that, even on well-maintained vessels, recirculate a significantly higher concentration of airborne particles than most indoor environments you encounter on land. The system is not failing. It is simply doing what it was designed to do. And your respiratory tract is absorbing the cumulative result over 48 hours of continuous exposure. For a body over 65 with any history of COPD, asthma, seasonal allergies, or even mild post-viral respiratory sensitivity, that accumulation builds into genuine irritation. The lining of your airways responds, and by day 3 or 4, what feels like a cold you must have caught before boarding is actually an environmental response that started the moment you sat down at the blackjack table on day 1. Most people do not connect the two things, because there are 2 days between cause and effect. That gap is long enough to make the source invisible. A 74-year-old from Lyon, France spent his first 2 sea days exactly as he had planned, in the ship's casino and interior dining rooms, and by day 4 had developed significant nasal congestion, fatigue, and mild chest tightness, despite having had no respiratory illness in 2 years on land. He spent 2 of his 7 nights propped on pillows, unable to sleep flat, after the ship's doctor confirmed the pattern was common in older travelers in enclosed spaces. 30 minutes of outdoor deck time each. Morning and a saline nasal rinse each evening would likely have prevented it entirely. The traveler who knew this spent the first 48 hours alternating between the deck and interior spaces and used a travel-size saline rinse each night before bed. By day 3, their respiratory system was stable. The traveler who did not spend day 4 and 5 in mild but persistent discomfort that colored every activity for the rest of the sailing. Here is what you do. In the first 48 hours specifically, prioritize time on the open deck over time in interior lounges, even if the weather is mild rather than warm. Fresh air is the protection, not sunshine. And if you have any pre-existing respiratory condition, carry your rescue inhaler in your jacket pocket, not in your cabin safe, because the moment you need it is rarely the moment you are near your room. The exact words to say are, fresh air before the first show, every day. And once you understand what the ship's air does to your respiratory system, the physical structure of the ship itself introduces a different kind of risk entirely. Item 4 is the one that produced some of the most serious injuries I responded to during my time at sea, and it is almost always caused by a decision that felt entirely reasonable in the moment. Using the ship's staircases instead of the elevator, to stay active, to avoid a queue, to feel like you are not the kind of person who waits, places your body in one of the most unforgiving environments on a moving vessel. Modern cruise ships span 18 or more decks. The interior staircases are narrow, metal-edged, and designed for efficiency rather than comfort. The handrails are present, but they require consistent grip strength and lateral stability to be effective. On a sea day with any degree of vessel motion, even motion so subtle you do not consciously notice it, your body is making constant micro-corrections to maintain balance, and those corrections consume the neurological reserve that would otherwise catch a misstep. A fall on a ship's staircase is not a sprained ankle situation. With no orthopedic surgical suite aboard, and the nearest equipped hospital potentially 12 hours away by emergency evacuation, a fractured hip or wrist at sea is an entirely different category of medical event than the same injury on land. The reason people take this risk is that it does not feel like a risk. It feels like using the stairs. A 69-year-old from Hamburg, Germany fell on an interior staircase on day 2 of a Baltic cruise and fractured her wrist. The medical center stabilized the fracture, but she was airlifted from the ship's next port to a hospital in Copenhagen, and her cruise ended on day 2. Waiting 3 minutes for the elevator would have cost her nothing. The traveler who understood this rule used the elevator during every period of ship motion without exception and completed a 12-night sailing without incident. The traveler who took the stairs to feel active left the ship by helicopter 48 hours in. Here is what you do. Use the elevator anytime the ship is underway, regardless of how calm the sea appears and regardless of how short the staircase journey seems. And if you take any medication that lists dizziness as a side effect, which includes a wide range of blood pressure, anxiety, and sleep medications, treat the elevator as the only option, not the convenient one. The exact words to say are, elevators are not laziness. They are wisdom. Now here is where things become significantly more serious, and where I saw the most preventable outcomes in my time working on board. Those outcomes involve 3 things that feel completely normal: having a drink with dinner, spending time in the sun, and eating at a local restaurant in port, and every one of them works differently on your body at sea than it does at home. Item 5 is one I want you to sit with for a moment before I explain it, because the mechanism is not what most people expect. Drinking alcohol aboard a cruise ship at the same pace you drink it on land is one of the most reliable ways to end up in a ship's medical center, and it has almost nothing to do with how much you drink. By age 65, your body has less total water to dilute alcohol, your liver processes it more slowly, and if you are taking any antihypertensive, anticoagulant, diuretic, statin, or anxiety medication, which a large proportion of travelers in this age group are, the interaction between alcohol and those drugs intensifies both the sedative effect and the cardiovascular impact in ways that do not happen in a younger, unmedicated system. Then add the ship. Even on a calm sea day, the vessel is in constant low-level motion, and that motion places a continuous load on your inner ear and your balance system. Alcohol impairs both. The result is that 2 glasses of wine at dinner aboard a ship, on your medications in mild motion, can produce the physiological effect of 4 glasses on land, without you ever feeling what most people would describe as drunk. The beverage packages make this worse because the psychology of getting value from a prepaid purchase quietly overrides your body's signals. 72-year-old from Toronto purchased an unlimited beverage package and had 4 glasses of wine at dinner on day 3, alongside his prescribed blood pressure medication and a mild sedative. He collapsed in the corridor outside the restaurant with a blood pressure reading that had dropped to a dangerous level, spent 2 nights in the ship's medical center, and could have prevented the entire episode by having a single conversation with his physician before boarding. The traveler who knew, this set a firm 2-drink limit on sea days regardless of any package purchased and completed the sailing without incident. The traveler who did not spend 48 hours in a fluorescent medical room instead of at sea. Here is what you do. Before you board, ask your physician directly, How does alcohol interact with every medication I am currently taking? And write the answer down and bring it with you. Aboard the ship, set a personal ceiling of 2 drinks on any day the vessel is underway, and hold that ceiling regardless of what you have paid for in advance. The exact words to say are, half the amount, twice the sea. The sun carries a different kind of risk, and it is one that catches people who consider themselves experienced with heat, completely off guard. Item 6 involves a category of medication, side effects that most people are never explicitly warned about in a way that sticks. Many of the prescriptions most commonly taken by people over 65, certain diuretics, blood pressure drugs, cholesterol medications, antibiotics, and antidepressants, cause photosensitivity, which means your skin's reaction to UV light is dramatically amplified beyond what it would normally be. At sea, that amplification is compounded because sunlight reflects off the surface of the water, effectively increasing your UV exposure compared to sitting in the same conditions on land. Your skin is receiving more UV than you would encounter at a beach because of the reflective surface beneath you. And your medication is making your skin respond to that UV more intensely than it would without the prescription. Second-degree sunburn from 90 minutes of direct exposure is not a hypothetical outcome. I saw it. And in a body over 65, severe sunburn is not a cosmetic issue. It triggers a systemic inflammatory response, elevates blood pressure, disrupts fluid balance, and can tip into heat illness in a body whose temperature regulation is already less efficient than it was at 40. Most people do not know their medications do this because the photosensitivity warning is buried in a package insert no one reads, and nothing about a warm sunny deck feels dangerous. 67-year-old from Phoenix, a city where she had spent decades in genuine desert sun without incident, spent 2 hours on the pool deck in the Eastern Caribbean while taking hydrochlorothiazide for blood pressure and developed second-degree burns across her shoulders and upper chest by evening, along with a fever that required IV fluids at the ship's medical center. One conversation with her pharmacist before sailing and a wide-brim hat would have changed everything. The traveler who knew this asked their pharmacist for a complete photosensitivity review of every prescription before boarding, wore SPF 50+ and a hat on every sunny day, and rotated between sun and shade in 45-minute intervals throughout the cruise. The traveler who did not spend 2 medical center visits managing an inflammatory response that affected the final 3 days of the sailing. Here is what you do. Before you leave home, go to your pharmacist, not just your physician, and ask specifically which of your current medications increase sun sensitivity. Because pharmacists are trained to flag this in a way that a busy clinical appointment sometimes does not. On any sunny day at sea, apply SPF 50 or higher to all exposed skin before you go out, wear a wide-brim hat, and treat 45 minutes in direct sun as your hard limit before you move into shade. The exact words to say are, "My medications change what the sun does to me." And once you are in port, a third category of risk appears, one that is invisible, has no warning label, and is entirely dependent on choices. You make it a restaurant table. Item 7 is about what happens when your immune system, which is operating at a naturally reduced level of responsiveness compared to a decade ago, encounters the food and water standards of a port environment it was not prepared for. In many Caribbean, Mexican, Central American, and Mediterranean ports, the local water supply and food handling infrastructure differs significantly from what you have at home. This is not a judgment of those places. It is a biological reality about what your body can manage now versus what a 35-year-old traveling companion's body can manage. A bacterial or parasitic exposure that a younger traveler processes and clears in 24 hours can develop in your system into a genuine gastrointestinal illness requiring medical intervention, IV fluids, and a course of antibiotics, and the 4 highest risk exposures I consistently observed were ice made from local water, fresh squeezed juices, raw shellfish, and food from street vendors where preparation conditions cannot be verified. The ship's medical center will treat you, but the treatment carries a cost. The illness costs you port days that cannot be recovered, and the antibiotics sometimes continue well after the cruise ends. Most people do not apply the same caution at a port restaurant that they would apply abroad on land, because the ship feels like a safety net, and it is, but only after the exposure has already happened. A 70-year-old from Melbourne ate fresh ceviche at a local restaurant during a Central American port stop and was ill within 6 hours. She spent 3 of her final 4 port days confined to her cabin and required a course of antibiotics that cost her $340 at the ship's medical center. Returning to the ship for lunch would have cost her nothing. The traveler, who followed a strict port food protocol, no ice, no tap water, no raw shellfish, no unverifiable sauces, completed a 10-night sailing through 4 ports without a single digestive symptom. The traveler who did not spend $340 and 3 days horizontal. Here is what you do. In every port, apply one consistent personal rule with no exceptions. No ice from local sources, no tap water, no raw shellfish, and no food from vendors where you cannot see the cooking process directly. If you have any doubt about a restaurant's kitchen standards, return to the ship for the meal. The buffet will always be open, and your remaining port days are worth more than any local dish. The exact words to say are, "If I can't see it cooked, I don't eat it here." Before we go further, I want to take one moment here because what you have just heard covers information that most people board a ship without ever knowing. Quick pause here. If you are realizing how much of this you did not know before today, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it helps get this information in front of other seniors who need to see it before their next sailing. Now, the next 3 sections cover the situations that took the most convincing to get former insiders to talk about openly. Let us keep going. Think these situations. Terry, wait. What comes next has kept passengers awake long. After the cruise ended, what took the most convincing to share is not information about what the cruise line does. It is information about what well-meaning, health-conscious travelers do to themselves without realizing it, while genuinely trying to take care of their bodies. Item 11 is the one I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, and I want to deliver on that promise fully. The invisible dehydration window is the single most common medical reason I saw bring people over 65 into the ship's medical center, and the reason it is invisible is precise. Your body's thirst mechanism becomes less sensitive with age. By 65, you are already operating with a reduced baseline thirst response compared to a younger traveler, meaning you feel less thirsty even when your fluid levels are dropping. Aboard a ship, the conditions make this worse in every direction simultaneously. The air conditioning suppresses the heat cues that would normally prompt you to drink. The novelty of the environment, the excursions, the entertainment, the social engagement, distracts you from hunger and thirst signals your body is sending quietly in the background. And the things you are consuming while you feel perfectly fine, coffee in the morning, wine at lunch, a blood pressure diuretic with your evening medications, are all drawing fluid out of your system faster than you are replacing it. The result is a person who has been drinking throughout the day, who feels normal, whose electrolyte balance has been deteriorating for 2.5 days, and who discovers the problem suddenly, in a port market, on a shore excursion, in the middle of dinner, when confusion or profound weakness arrives without warning. In a 65-plus body, moderate dehydration does not announce itself gently. It arrives as a medical event. People do not catch this because they are drinking. The act of drinking feels like the solution, and they have no reason to suspect the solution is insufficient. A 71-year-old from Toronto, an experienced cruiser who considered herself health-conscious, drank coffee each morning. Wine at lunch and water periodically throughout the day, felt completely normal, and on day 3 of a Caribbean cruise experienced sudden confusion and profound weakness while shopping at a port market, requiring her husband to bring her back to the ship where her sodium level was found to be significantly low, and she required IV rehydration, missing 2 ports of call. Setting an hourly hydration alarm and matching every caffeinated or alcoholic drink with a full glass of plain water would have kept her electrolytes stable across all 3 days. The traveler who set an hourly water alarm and followed the 1-for-1 rule for coffee and wine arrived at every port fully hydrated and completed the sailing without a single symptom. The traveler who drank the way she always had at home missed 2 ports and spent an afternoon connected to an IV drip. Here is what you do. Set an alarm on your phone or watch to remind you to drink water every hour for the entire duration of your cruise. Not just on hot days, not just on excursion days, every day from embarkation to disembarkation. And for every coffee or alcoholic drink you have, drink 1 full glass of plain water before your next meal, without exception. The exact words to say are 1 coffee, 1 water. 1 wine, 1 water. Every time, every day. And once you understand what your body does with fluids at sea, The impulse to manage your own minor symptoms with a familiar pill from your travel kit deserves a much harder look. Item 12 is a pattern I observed with enough consistency that I began to think of it as one of the most reliable predictors of a day 4 or day 5 medical center visit. Reaching into your travel kit or the ship's small shop for an over-the-counter medication when you develop a headache, joint pain, or indigestion aboard a cruise ship is not the low-stakes habit it feels like, because the medication you are reaching for does not know what else you are taking. Ibuprofen, which millions of people take for a headache without a second thought, directly increases bleeding risk in anyone on warfarin or other anticoagulants. Antihistamines commonly used for motion sickness or sleep interact with a range of cardiac medications in ways that can amplify sedation or alter heart rhythm. And certain antacids, the kind sold in every ship's retail outlet, reduce the absorption of critical medications, including some thyroid drugs and blood pressure treatments that you may have taken just hours earlier, effectively reducing their active dose without you or anyone else knowing it. On land, a pharmacist at the counter would flag every one of these interactions in 30 seconds. At sea, there is no pharmacist reviewing your full list before you open the packet. People take over-the-counter medications at sea the same way they do at home because those medications have always felt safe. And the word over-the-counter implies a level of harmlessness that does not account for what else is already in your system. 74-year-old from Munich took 4 ibuprofen tablets across the day for a tension headache in his standard practice at home, while on warfarin for a mechanical heart valve. And by day 4, his clotting levels had shifted into a dangerous range that was caught only because a ship's nurse happened to notice an anomaly during a follow-up visit for an unrelated issue, preventing what could have been a serious internal bleeding event. A written list of approved over-the-counter medications, confirmed by his physician before sailing, would have told him immediately that ibuprofen was not on it. The traveler who carried a pre-approved over-the-counter medication list, confirmed by their physician, took paracetamol for the same headache with no interaction risk and felt better within an hour. The traveler who did not spend day 4 in a dangerously elevated bleeding risk state that only luck and a second set of eyes resolved before it became something worse. Here is what you do. Before you leave home, sit with your physician or pharmacist and produce a written, confirmed list of every over-the-counter medication that is safe for you given your current prescription regimen, covering pain relief, sleep aids, antacids, antihistamines, and motion sickness treatments. Keep that list in your carry-on for the entire cruise, and consult it every single time you consider taking anything that is not already on your prescription list. The exact words to say are, "I check my list before I take anything new." And the final item in this section is one that affects people who are doing exactly what they came on the cruise to do. Be active, explore, feel alive. Item 13 is the one I most often saw in people who were proud of how well they were managing their health. Booking a physically demanding shore excursion on your first or second port day, a long walking tour, a snorkeling trip, a cycling excursion, without accounting for what 2 or 3 sea days have already cost your body, is one of the most consistent triggers for cardiovascular stress events I responded to during my career. Sea days feel restful. They are not. The vessel is in constant low-level motion throughout the night, and your body is making continuous postural adjustments to maintain stability even while you sleep. Your sleep is lighter and more fragmented than at home. The social stimulation, the change in routine, the disrupted meal timing, all of it produces a cumulative neurological and physiological fatigue that does not feel like tiredness because it is not muscular. You feel, on day 3 in port, genuinely energetic. What you are actually experiencing is the absence of acute pain, not the presence of full physiological reserve. Your cardiovascular system is being asked to perform an 88-degree heat on a 4-hour walking tour at a moment when it has been running below its rested baseline for 60 hours. People override this because the feeling of energy in port is real, and there is no internal signal that distinguishes between genuine readiness and the absence of obvious exhaustion. 70-year-old from Birmingham felt energetic on day 3 and signed up for a 4-hour walking tour in a Caribbean port in 88-degree heat after 2 nights of poor sleep from ship motion, collapsed with heat exhaustion 90 minutes into the tour, required emergency attention from local services, and was transported back to the ship with a heat exhaustion diagnosis that ended his port activity for the remainder of the sailing, booking the shortest, least demanding excursion available. on that first port day, and using it to calibrate how his body was actually responding would have told him everything he needed to know before committing to anything. Harder, the traveler who treated the first port day as a calibration, a short, easy excursion to test their actual energy levels, adjusted their subsequent bookings accordingly, and completed every planned activity across the remaining ports. The traveler who trusted how they felt on day 3 spent the rest of the sailing watching ports from the ship's rail. Here is what you do. Regardless of how you feel on your first port day, book the least physically demanding excursion option available and treat it as a body assessment, not a compromise, because the data your body gives you on that day is worth more than any plan you made at home. Then build the intensity of your excursions only after you have confirmed, in the actual conditions of that sailing, what your body can genuinely sustain. The exact words to say are, "How I feel on the ship is not how I perform on land today," but what comes in the next section carries consequences. Most passengers never see coming until it is too late. Those consequences are the ones I have thought about most carefully before sharing, because they are not about a single bad day aboard a ship. They are about decisions made before you board, or in a moment of fear while you are already in crisis, that determine whether you go home on your own terms or whether someone else makes that decision for you. Item 14 is the one I wish every traveler over 65 would sit with for a full hour before booking anything. Boarding a cruise ship without first confirming, in writing, with specific questions, exactly what your travel insurance covers and does not cover is the single most financially and medically consequential gap I observed across 11 years at sea. The ship's medical center operates at full private clinic rates. A moderate event, IV fluids, an ECG, a follow-up consultation, runs between $800 and $2,500. A serious cardiac event requiring surgical stabilization can reach $15,000 to $30,000 before any evacuation is considered. And helicopter medical evacuation from international waters, which I saw initiated multiple times during my career, in conditions where there was no other option, costs between $50,000 and $150,000 depending on location and the receiving facility. Standard travel insurance policies frequently exclude pre-existing conditions unless a specific rider has been purchased and documented at the time of policy application. The gap between what most people believe their policy covers and what it actually covers is not a technicality. It is a financial exposure that can permanently alter a retirement. People do not discover this gap before they sail because reading an insurance policy feels like a task for later. And most people assume that if they bought insurance, the serious things are covered. That assumption is the gap. A 72-year-old from Philadelphia suffered a cardiac event requiring helicopter evacuation from a ship in the Eastern Caribbean, incurred total medical costs of $94,000, and found that her travel insurance policy excluded cardiac events related to her pre-existing diagnosis, a condition she had not thought to disclose when purchasing the policy, leaving her in a 3-year dispute with the insurer that permanently impacted her retirement savings. A 30-minute phone call with her insurance provider before booking, asking the right 3 questions, would have revealed the exclusion and given her time to purchase appropriate coverage. The traveler who called their insurer before booking confirmed explicit coverage for onboard cardiac events, pre-existing conditions, and helicopter evacuation, and received that confirmation in writing, sailed with full protection and complete peace of mind. The traveler who assumed sailed into a $94,000 liability with no recourse. Here is what you do. Before you book any cruise, call your travel insurance provider directly and ask 3 specific questions. Does this policy cover onboard medical treatment, including cardiac events? Does it cover helicopter evacuation from international waters? And are pre-existing conditions fully covered if they have been stable for the past 12 months? And if any answer is not an unambiguous, documented yes, you need a different policy before you board. The exact words to say are, "Tell me exactly what my policy does not cover if I have a pre-existing condition." And the final item on this list is the one that affected me most deeply during my time at sea, because it is driven not by ignorance, but by love for a vacation and fear of losing it. Item 15 is the most consequential item on this entire list, and it is the one that breaks my heart to describe because the people who did it were not reckless. They were frightened. Withholding your medical history from the ship's doctor during a crisis, minimizing symptoms, omitting medications, Denying a cardiac or kidney history because you are afraid that full disclosure will get you removed from the ship is the single action that most directly dismantles the medical team's ability to keep you safe. Every treatment decision a ship's physician makes is based on the information in front of them. The medication selected, the dosage calculated, the interactions checked. All of it is calibrated to the patient they know about. When that patient is incomplete, when the kidney disease is omitted, when the anticoagulant is not mentioned, when the cardiac history is denied, the treatment is calibrated to a person who does not exist. And in a body under physiological stress, the wrong treatment does not simply fail to help. It can actively cause harm at a speed that the ship's limited medical resources cannot always reverse. People do this because the fear of losing thousands of dollars on a canceled cruise, in a moment of medical vulnerability, overrides the part of their mind that understands what is actually at risk. 78-year-old from Montreal concealed a history of kidney disease from the ship's medical team during a respiratory episode because he feared being disembarked, was given a medication that required normal kidney function to be safely processed, deteriorated significantly over the following 18 hours, and was ultimately evacuated in a far more critical condition than he would have been if the treating physician had known his history from the first moment. Handing over a laminated medical history card the moment the first crew member approached him would have changed every decision that followed. The traveler who handed a complete, laminated medical card to the ship's nurse at the first sign of illness received treatment calibrated precisely to their actual physiology, was stabilized within hours and continued sailing. The traveler who withheld his history to protect his vacation was airlifted off the ship in a critical state, which is exactly the outcome his silence was meant to prevent. Here is what you do. Before your cruise, write your complete medical history. Every diagnosed condition, every current medication with dosage, every allergy, every significant surgery on a single card, laminate it, and keep it in your wallet for the entire voyage. And if you ever need care aboard the ship, hand that card to the first medical professional who speaks to you before you answer a single question, because the 30 seconds it takes them to read it may be the 30 seconds that keeps you on the right treatment. The exact words to say are, "Here is my full medical history. Please read it before you ask me anything." You now carry the medical knowledge that a cruise ship doctor accumulates over 11 years at sea, and that the vast majority of passengers over 65 will board their next cruise completely without. You are no longer the passenger who steps aboard hoping for the best. You are the passenger who boards prepared, who knows what their medications do at sea, who has registered with the medical center, who carries their history in their wallet, who has confirmed what their insurance actually covers. That is not a small shift. That is the difference between a vacation and a medical event. 2 seniors will board the same ship on the same morning. One will eat the embarkation buffet without restraint, drink the same in the hot tub as they do at home, spend 2 hours in the Caribbean sun on a diuretic, and assume their standard travel insurance will handle anything that comes up. The other, and that is you now, will have spoken to their doctor, registered with the ship's medical team, kept a water bottle in hand every hour, and asked the 2 questions about their insurance policy that could save them 6 figures. Same ship, completely different outcomes. Dr. Calloway spent 11 years watching preventable things happen to people who simply did not know what he knew, and the reason he shared all of this is the same reason you stayed until the end, because you deserve to take care of yourself as well on that ship as you do at home. In our next video, a former cruise line guest services director reveals the exact phrases you can use at the front desk to receive complimentary cabin upgrades, priority dining reservations, and free shore excursion credits. Benefits that cruise lines make available specifically to passengers who know how to ask, and that go unclaimed every sailing because most guests do not know the words. If you have a cruise booked in the next 12 months, that video could change what you experience on board. It is right here, and it is worth clicking before you do anything else today.